A running joke I love to make is the fact that if I was a man, I'd be insufferable, but because I'm a girl, it makes me attractive and cool. I mean, I love film bro movies like Fight Club, play creep on my electric guitar, and can give you a nice handful of anime to watch, all while woman-splaining media analysis. But perhaps the most egregious example of this is my love for Scott Pilgrim. My first experience with Scott Pilgrim was when I don't know how young I was, but my dad turned it on and presented it under the guise of a romantic comedy. But between that and The Princess Bride, he didn't know what weird sense of humor he just created.
Is Scott here?
You know what? He just left.
When 2020 rolled around and I became more of a cinephile, I really learned to appreciate the movie, and now it's in my top 5 favorites of all time. I showed everyone it. Friends, family, every guy I dated or tried to date, which in hindsight I may have created some evil ex-boyfriends with that, but that's past me now. I breathed that sense of style forever. I was gifted the graphics for Christmas and tore through them. I played the game as soon as it came out. I even went as Ramona for a Halloween that following year. Obviously, when I heard about the Netflix animated adaptation, I was extremely excited but yet confused. We already had the perfect adaptation of this with literally the same people, cast, and creative crew. Does this need to be a TV show? If you also thought this, then congratulations! You are also a victim of Netflix's marketing for this series. I don't think I would change it for the world though, because after episode 1, oh my god. Now, I can't properly review this show without getting into spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, please do. It's amazing. So now's your chance. Click off, watch the movie if you haven't seen it, and the show. Are we good? You gone? Okay, cool. Scott Pilgrim takes the L and dies in the first episode. And I love it. Whenever I say I love IP, this is what I'm talking about. I love Scott Pilgrim, but that story has been told. This allows us in the same world, but takes a different path. Some people have joked about this being Ramona Flowers versus the world, and I adore that idea. Instead of Scott fighting to win Ramona, Ramona grows in order to get Scott back. Let's talk a little bit about Ramona, actually. Ramona, in the original adaptations, meaning the comics and the movies, no matter if it's the point or if I still think she's cool, is a manic pixie dream girl. Scott idolizes and romanticizes her so much that she is scrubbed of much of a personality. But seeing a new story through Ramona's eyes shares her personality and everyone else's. While not as polished as the movie in terms of editing, production, acting, everything, I honestly believe that this is the definitive version of these characters. I love the movie, and the comic is great too. But Scott and his friends are all one-dimensional loser assholes. All the girls are just manic pixie dream girls. And pretty much every single ex with the argument of maybe Gideon is not developed at all. But here, not only do I think that all the characters are so amazingly fun and fleshed out, I actually believe and am rooting for the main romance between Scott and Ramona. I already kind of mentioned it, but I love how this isn't the movie in the slightest. I'm a sucker for what if or alternate timeline scenarios, and this is a peak version of it. All the characters have fun little backstories and quirks, and most importantly, development. The characters that you meet in episode 1 that follow the movie are nothing like the characters that you see in the epilogue. Everyone gets an arguably happy ending, which you like because there isn't really a traditional villain in this story, and you want things to work out for this weird found family. I touched on it briefly, but I especially appreciate the focus being on Ramona and having her be the lead and deal with her exes in a non-conventional way. I know the whole point of the original story is that Scott is not a good guy, and that's why Ramona is romanticized and underdeveloped, but that doesn't mean that I don't want more. I loved seeing her grow and reconnect with her past, and you want so badly to know about it, and just now are we finally getting it. And it makes sense. Nothing about the new stuff in this show seems forced or contrived. I love the thought that, at least this is how I interpreted it, that this is the good timeline. The main villain of the show, if you can even really call him that, is the original Scott Pilgrim, such as the one from the comics and the movies that fought through all Ramona's evil ex-boyfriends. He and Ramona's relationship failed after the events of the original story, and he became bitter and tried to stop the relationship from ever happening through timeline shenanigans. But because of all the extra growth the characters go through in this version, everyone takes a new, better path that just makes sense for them. If you didn't know, the movie actually has 2 endings. The original one actually ends with Scott and Knives ending up together, and the one that is in the final cut of the movie, Scott and Ramona end up together. Yet both, for me, kind of fall flat. Scott and Knives, if you don't even want to think about the high school grooming implications, feels unsatisfying because everyone is the exact same from the beginning. Scott is still with the same girl that he clearly didn't learn that he shouldn't be dating, and literally all of the troubles that he went through in the movie equal to nothing. And where he ends up with Ramona, it just seems like a doomed relationship waiting to happen. Maybe it's just the literal sparks that are seen in the show, but it actually feels like Scott and Ramona should end up together in that version. Ramona doesn't try to fight to win Scott like a prize, but grows and makes people around her better, and herself. And the ending gives kind of a bittersweet moment. Despite seeing a future where Scott is an evil ex and the two end up split, they have hope to make it work because they've learned and grown in ways that their comic and movie original counterparts didn't. Talking about development and relationships, the exes are specifically a standout. Shout out to Roxy and Lucas Lee, which I think has the best and most compelling development. I mean, just the movie store fight scene alone is an 11 out of 10. But everyone, well, maybe except the twins, but that's kind of a running gag, get some closure with Ramona and do things that make them happy without being hung up on a girl from the past. And it's kind of cute that Ramona can be friends or at least live with these people because they've grown. Well, maybe not Gideon. Kind of weird how they gloss over his abuse, but at least he's still evil at the end of it and didn't try to completely retcon him. But I mean, come on, Chris Evans kills his voice acting. Todd falling in love with Wallace is hilarious, because I mean, who wouldn't fall in love with Wallace? And the finale taking place at a musical adaptation of the original Scott Pilgrim story, written by Knives and Steven and led by Matthew Patel, is something I didn't even know that I needed in my life, but I 100% did. Goes to show that the true evil exes were the friends we made along the way. Another thing I find funny is how 3 of the evil exes act as Scott Pilgrim throughout the show. I'm sure there's some symbolism that you can find about Ramona being haunted by the past and future at the same time, but it's also just funny seeing buff Lucas Lee try to impersonate a Michael Cera. Few quick fire shots. The animation is gorgeous. Please let me hang up every frame on my wall. Music is good, which is to be expected. Most of the voiceovers are really good, but even the weakest performances I wouldn't call bad. Love the little cameos and references. Fights are excellently choreographed and animated. I could probably rave forever. But what surprised me the most was the heart. I'm a sucker for found family tropes, and I liked all these losers getting a new, arguably happier story. If you don't like this version, well, for 1, you're wrong, and 2, the originals still exist. But it is nice that this version is out here, living in perfect isolation and connection at the same time. This is how you do IP. Take the original and give a new perspective. We have heard the same people's stories the same way for centuries now. If big corporations see this hopeful success of this show and take note, I would be the happiest camper. I know I'm a brain-dead consumer that walked into the show expecting the same old, but it wasn't. It took a risk, and I loved it and welcomed it with open arms. So as of now, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is a 9 out of 10, but it may move to a 10 out of 10 the more I think about it. This shows that you can make something original while still being faithful to the tone in the source material. This oozed Scott Pilgrim, even when removing Scott Pilgrim. A+ decision. Thank you for watching.